Reg, thanks so much for taking a minute to talk with us.
Well, I'm delighted that we're having a chance to visit a bit.
Yeah. Well, tell me, first of all, how you came to Westwood. What is the story of your connection with the church family?
My wife, Penny, and I moved to Los Angeles a long, long time ago when I graduated from law school. And we were looking around for a church home. At law school, we had attended the Methodist Church that was not far from the Yale campus. And so we tried a couple of other churches in the area, but when they didn't work out, and we tried Westwood. The first day we walked into the church, my wife, turned to me and she said, "I just love the feel of this sanctuary, and it's obviously a terrific sanctuary, and I very much enjoyed the community and the leadership, so we stayed."
And that was just a couple of years ago, it sounds like.
Yeah, that was the maybe the fall of '73 or the spring of '74. So that was a long, long time ago, and lots of changes since then.
Wow, yeah, you have seen a lot of changes, I am sure.
We have.
What are some of the transitions, not necessarily negative, because there's always challenges in any faith community, but what are some of the transitions that you've seen that have maybe you would have never anticipated over those 40 years?
Well, I must say that one of the things that really has impressed me is how resilient this church congregation has been and how it has been able to step into the future and make changes. And, just to give you, one dramatic example, shortly after we joined the church, it fell way, way behind in paying its apportionments, and it was, struggling to maintain the budget. And a group of families kind of rallied and went to the bishop's office and said, we need to have an additional minister in this church that really focuses on families and children. And Bill Hobbs was a terrific senior minister, but he was stretched thin with everything that he was doing. And the word came down from on high that, hey guys, until you get caught up on your apportionments and demonstrate that you actually can support another clergy person, why would the church send you another one? And with the permission of the trustees and the church council, particular fundraising drive was made in order to get the money together to, demonstrate to the conference that the church was in fact committed. And Jerry Larson was called, and he did a terrific job with the young people and the youth for many, many years. Well, if you think about that as, one example, another example, which is now several years old, but took a long time getting there, was, getting a preschool at the church. That was a big, big project, tremendous contribution to the community. And I consider the Belmont Village project, again, another example of, this church's ability to adjust to new circumstances, offer new opportunities to the community. And, I think it's just absolutely terrific.
That's awesome. My assumption is that over those many years, you have served in a lot of different capacities. I know today we wanted to talk about follow-up a bit, but other than follow-up, what are some of the other ways that you have enjoyed being involved in the church?
Well, I've served in the past on the trustees. I've served on various church councils and committees, and also as lay leader. But for board work and committee work, I do so much of that in my day job as a corporate finance lawyer that when I started teaching follow-up, I found that to be extremely satisfying personally, and also kind of a contribution that was a little different than I did in my corporate legal practice. So you're right. I've served on lots of different boards and lots of different committees and enjoyed meeting the people. And probably for my wife and me and the group of families who kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s, the Family Life Committee was a big, a big part of our church life, and we made a lot of lifelong friends through that committee. So that was certainly a wonderful experience. But the chance that follow-up offers me for, really seriously digging into the biblical record, thinking seriously about how it applies to our circumstances here in Los Angeles, is obviously something that I've spent quite a bit of time on in the last several years, and I've certainly enjoyed it.
So for somebody who maybe isn't familiar with follow-up, whether they attend Westwood or maybe they're listening to this just on the web, how would you describe follow-up? What is it, and what's the purpose of it?
Well, because follow-up is led by different presenters on different Sundays, there's actually a wide variety of follow-up offerings. So the way I'm describing my follow-up offering is not the same as you'd experience with somebody else, but I think a kind of a common denominator is it's an opportunity for a dialogue discussion to extend and follow up the worship service in a circumstance which allows people to dialogue about serious issues that are rooted in the life of the faith community. And what I try to emphasize in my follow-up presentations is the tremendous riches that we have in the library that we call the Bible, and the ability of the church to dive back into those scriptures and be informed by the parade of witnesses over literally hundreds of years and many different authors. It's a particular treasure that the church has, and so I really do try to spend the follow-up times that I do in biblical study and getting people to understand that the Bible is worth some very, very serious time and attention, and that if you leave off your Bible study at the level of a fourth grader or fifth grader, or even somebody in junior high or high school, that certainly is a benefit up to a point, but there is a lot more there that can be pursued as an adult. And much of the depiction of the Bible and the church in popular culture is just so far off the mark that it's good for people to have a place to kind of go back to the sources and see, what the Bible actually does say.
If somebody were to want to begin that exploration, beyond follow-up, but to dig deeper, to become more aware of original intent of the author or the community, and kind of move beyond more of a basic understanding, what are some resources or suggestions that you would have for them?
These days there are a tremendous variety of books that are very good resources, and I am not as familiar with the social media and the internet as some people are, but I understand there are lots of good resources there as well. For me, I like some of the current theologians that are helping us to recover the movement aspect of Christianity as well as the institutional aspect. And I'm enough of a citizen of the everyday world that I know the importance of institutions, and we do need companies and schools and universities and colleges and churches, and those are all different kinds of institutions. But Christianity started as a movement rather than as an institution, and the movement notion of Christianity is one that I like to encourage people to think about. And I want people to think about Christianity as action and adventure. It's God's action in the world and the adventure of us being part of God's action in the world. And the church can be a big part of that. The biblical witness can help us. But it's really a movement of people trying to find out where is God at work in my world, and how do I get there and help God? So it's that emphasis. And in popular culture, Christianity is often caricatured as if you believe X, Y, and Z, if you do A, B, and C, then you're going to die and go to heaven. And that's backwards. I mean, it's like somebody going into a job and saying, the first thing I'd like to really focus on the retirement benefits here. What are you guys doing in retirement? And any HR person would show you the door, which is, no, we're not interested in you retiring. We got tons of work to do here. And, if you want to be part of our movement, of our group, of our company, these are the things that, we want you to concentrate on. And so this is, in my mind, this is not so much about how do we get to heaven. It's rather, how do we share heaven here? How do we get people here to experience the loving community that God intended us to live in? So, and I want to use the biblical witness to remind people of that. One of my favorite ways of getting people to think about this is just remind them that if you listen carefully to the Lord's Prayer, the first word is our, which reminds us that this is not a do-it-yourself project. This is a community effort. And what Jesus prays in there is that your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So it's not about, it's about moving God's kingdom into our world, embodying it, and encouraging others in that quest for the divine community. And again, kingdom is such ancient language that it kind of maybe throws people off, but sure. A substitute word would be commonwealth or community or beloved community. I mean, it's the government of God, and what makes God's government unique is there's no coercion involved. And so we are invited to live a life in pursuit of action and adventure, peace and harmony, without violence, without coercion, without judgment. And that's a big adventure.
Yeah. I love those two words, action and adventure. How is God in action in our world, and how do we join the adventure? That's very powerful. Is there perhaps a book that you've read recently that you'd recommend on this topic that you? There is, and I wish I had thought to bring the book with me so I could quote the author correctly. But this book, I believe it's authored by Marinol Priest, and the name of the book is Christ Before Christianity, and he is a very careful biblical scholar, and he tries to get back to the movement aspects of Christianity by just a very, very careful reading of the scriptures and example after example after example of how Jesus actually lived his life without regard to the conventional structures and institutions of his day. And there's a quote in the New Testament, I believe it's in one of Peter's letters, in which he says, and this sounds paradoxical, but because we are slaves of God, we live as free people.
And the insight behind that, the thought behind that, is that if your only boss is God, that devalorizes every earthly power, every institutional, conventional way of control. And, our commercial society, our popular culture, is all about working, buying, selling, entertainment. And we all need to work, we need to buy, we need to sell, we need to be entertained. But that's not what life's about. And so we need a strong counter cultural voice from the Christian community, reminding people that we are more than workers, producers, consumers, and audiences for entertainment. So there are lots of Christian writers that help us kind of recover that. That's the kind of attitude that I'm hoping to remind myself and also encourage others.
Sure. What would you say are some of the ways that you have been transformed or grown in your own faith as you have been teaching follow-up over the years?
For me, there, it is a reminder when I dip back into the scriptures, when I go to worship services, it is a reminder to not be complacent, do not be accepting of the status quo, be committed to continuing to try to move closer to God's will. And, as good Methodists, we ought to be, thinking in terms of these ideas of sanctification and perfection, which are kind of technical terms in Methodist theology.
Sure.
But the underlying thought behind that is that being a Christian is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a pilgrimage. It's a progression. And so, we need to keep moving towards, the goals of being more fully alive. And, one of the church fathers, within the first couple of hundred years of the Christian church, had a great quote, which is, the glory of God is a human being fully alive. Fully alive. And so, one of the things I try to remind myself is, am I really alive? What else should I be doing to be really alive? And the Christian answer to that is, the more we align our life with where God is active in the world, the more life flows through us and the more fully alive we are. And so I'm very grateful for the Christian community to give me a kind of a counter-cultural voice in the community, a place where we can go and be reminded of these very, very basic truths and dreams.
That's wonderful. Well, Reg, thank you for sharing about your experience at Westwood and follow up. And I think people will be very inspired by your words, both in audio format as well as printed. So thanks for taking the time, man.